Welcome to another episode of the Anxious to Secure podcast. Today we're talking about another reason why you might be still anxiously attached in your relationships and why things have not shifted. Because a lot of people are using attachment theory wrong. There are reasons why you're thinking, hey, I'm anxious, my partner is so avoidant, and why are things not shifting. So a lot of people think attachment theory is this fixed thing. It's this label, and once you're figuring out, I'm anxiously attached, I'm an overthinker, this is me. And in this episode, I'm going to talk about what attachment theory actually is, where you're getting your ideas maybe a little bit wrong, why I became securely attached so fast, and some of the myths here. And I'm going to talk about old versus new attachment theory. This might be the key where things could shift for you. Because, I'm going to break down what the difference is. I think maybe you might be still in the old attachment theory stuck, where you think, you know what, I am anxious. I am this thing, and that's it. So let's go. I hope you can see Maya bear sitting today. She's going to keep me company or us. So let's go. So if you're new here, I'm Yula. I'm an anxious attachment style coach. And I used to be, very anxiously, very anxiously attached, where I was very insecure or thinking a lot. I would spend time in the future, thinking about the worst case scenarios, about people leaving me, rejecting me, abandoning me. And I always made it mean like, I'm not good enough. I'm not pretty enough, smart enough, witty enough, not enough in general. And so that led me to abandoning myself, needs, playing myself down, avoiding conversations, social events, had massive amounts of social anxiety, canceling on friends at that time. And I felt like they were resentful towards me. And I always thought people would talk about me and everyone would look at me and had the worst thoughts about me. And I was always painfully awkward and so socially shy, even though as a little kid. And attachment theory really stems from, hey, what happens to you as a kid, how you bond to as your main caregivers like your mom or your dad. If you attach to them in a specific way, this is how you then later attach to romantic partners too. So I was always hiding behind my mom's back, meaning I was always very close to her when I felt anxious, especially if like visitors came, meaning later on I was attaching to my partner, and whenever I felt a little bit insecure, I needed him to be close. So that's kind of a pattern that can show up. Let's talk about now specifics so you can understand a little bit more what we're talking about today. So first of all, who developed this theory? John Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth were the original founders and creators of attachment theory. More John Bowlby. I think Mary Ainsworth was then later his student. And then now the new theory was expanded. That was more developed later by Sue Johnson. This is the first thing I want to just share, the foundations. Then I should have hit this one too, but anyway, the old theory, that one that is heavily shared and the one we really know of, says the main caregiver, the person we are bonding with when we are little, either our mom or our dad, mostly our mom, is the one who really creates the blueprint for love. As I mentioned, if you've been attached very much to your mom, or if she was more stressed and anxious and clingy and overly helicoptering around you, that made a huge influence on your attachment style as well. So the old theory is very much on early bonding focused. So how you attach to your early main caregivers create the blueprint for your love later. That's what the old theory says. New theory says, yes, that is important. We don't want to, say no to this. However, also other factors that also play a key role. For example, if you have a hypersensitive nervous system, or if you're just, a sensitive person like I am, like my mom is, like my sister is, this will also play my brother, this will play a massive role for how you then yeah, attached to people too and to things. Like everything makes me more anxious if a neighbor comes around, and I'm actually anyway very sensitive to things. It will trigger me much more. So this will play a massive role as well. Any kind of uncertainties, if you've been moving a lot around, you've been going from home to home, if your parents were not there and you've been growing up in a foster care, or your parents were just not home a lot, everything is just much more stronger if you're living through kind of uncertain moments. Let's say you're hypersensitive and your parents were arguing and shouting a lot, that also influences you. If there was a death in your family early on and you felt that impact, or you were already 14 and you were heavily bullied, that can also play a role still to how your attachment style is. I think there's a percentage around 30-40%. That is what now the new attachment theory says is impacting what your parents do or did early on, and the rest is all the other influences, then how your experiences have been around romantic relationships, friendships, in school, in kindergarten, all of the other experiences around you has shaped your attachment style too. So that is just another thing to notice here. Really important. What else is the important part? So now this is really important. So the third one is, all attachment theory says I am anxious. That is me. That is you. Maybe my partner is avoidant attached. This is who he is. He is avoidant. And I always slip into this role sometimes and calling my partner as well. You're doing this because you're avoidant. And I really need to stop myself, because this is not good. Labeling someone is never good. And my partner was always a strong person who said, you can't, like, as soon as you label someone, it's over, because in their mind, they have an excuse or like a reason to not shift into a different pattern. So he always hated when someone of his clients, he used to work with mental health patients, and as soon as someone was diagnosed, they were always like playing into this role even more. I have more of a different balance view. I think a label can help enormously, because when I figured out I had an anxious attachment style, I didn't see it as like I am this thing and I can't change that. I thought like, oh my God, now everything makes sense. That's why I only feel safe around close, relationships, with like why I'm always like a relationship girly. That's why I want to be with my partner all the time. That's why I feel like so easily rejected and sensitive to people's reactions. That's why I can feel a mood shift, and I'm so attuned to people's emotions. That's why everything makes sense now. That's why I'm trying to get my partner to change so much, and I'm so activated versus he's so deactivated. So feeling it all makes sense and you're normal and there's place for you, it is also very, very validating, and it's very important, for me, and it was for me for my healing journey. However, I do understand his part, where a lot of people stay stuck there. They think, this is me, that's why I'm anxious, that's why I'm this overthinker, and then it's me. I'm an overthinker, and that's why I do this. And they don't even understand that, hey, you know what? Just because you're naturally wired to do this, or you've been wired to do this because of your childhood, because of these experiences, it doesn't mean you're always going to be like that. So this is the most biggest important part I want you to take out of this list. There's a few other parts that are similar, but you are not this. This is the old things. Like, I am anxious. I am this identity, and I can't change, because a new attachment theory says a part of me feels anxious. Part of me is anxious, because first of all, we can always shift into the different styles. This is usually how you visualize anxious attachment. You're really much overlapping onto the other person, versus a secure relationship is more like there is like an equal. This is not a great drawing I gave you here, but there is some kind of overlap in the middle, which represents the relationship. This here, this circle is you, this is your partner, and you have still your whole identity, versus your partner still has their own hobbies in life and themselves. And then you also have a shared part in there, versus the anxious is really much overtaking. However, you can shift in here. And right now, it doesn't mean you're 100% anxious. You could be also swinging over here. And attachment theory is just one part of you. You're also sometimes very curious. Sometimes you're already confident and secure in some areas or some situations. It could be that in friendships, you're very secure, you're very confident, you're very much your most secure version of yourself. It could be that in romantic relationships, you're very much anxious, you're very much an overthinker. But again, even there, it's still a part of you. You're so much more. So there's these two things you really, really want to remember. The next one is also really, really important. So the old attachment theory says label first, label over everything. And that is where it gets a bit dangerous, right? Like label could be anxious attachment, disorganized attachment, avoidant attachment. And I had clients come to me where I used words that were very triggering for them, where I said, in like an email, I think, to one client, oh yeah, it takes the longest for the disorganized attachment style to shift into the secure area. So it's like the longest way. And they felt so triggered because they made it mean like, oh, and there's something wrong with you. You have the most healing work to do. Versus if you reframe it, you're like, okay, you have also the more growth you have to do, the more empowering it is for you, because it doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. It is also like so empowering because any tiny shift is immediately visible. And it's also not true that just because right now, if you look at this, it's on the opposite side of the spectrum, right? So in theory, it looks like it's the longest way to go. However, if you look at the clients who did the work and who became securely attached, it's actually much faster. Yes, it's a lot of work because usually someone with a disorganized attachment style grew up with capital T trauma. So they really grew up with parents who were either narcissistic parents or had tendencies in that direction, or were abusive, or had some kind of substance abuse, and there were poverty, or was some kind of bigger traumatic impact on the kids. So you can now understand maybe why it would make why it's just more emotional work to shift into a secure attachment style. However, because they are very much on like, hey, I want to grow, I want to do the work, it actually is much faster to create a secure attachment style versus the avoidant, because they're so avoidant and they're so emotionally unavailable to themselves and other people, is actually the one who usually move the slowest. So you can always reframe it as like, hey, this is not just who you are, you can change, and there's nuances to this. There's also so many other people who like, just because one person says something or one theory says something and it is this way, it doesn't mean it is black and white. Okay, I don't know if this example that I just gave made sense in what I wanted to say, but maybe it does for some. Anyway, because it's a raw episode, I don't want to make many cutouts. I hope you're okay with this. And then the new attachment theory says it's the dynamic first. So yeah, the label is important to first understand, hey, where am I on this spectrum? But then it's also to look at the dynamic. It's not that you are the problem if you have an anxious attachment style or are disorganized attached or avoidant or whatever. It's the dynamic that is the problem. So if you are in a relationship and then let's say you are actually attached and attracted to someone with an avoidant attachment style, the dynamic is the problem where you are always the one who's activated and it's like going into your partner, tries to solve it, tries to talk about it, try to earn their love, because you're so activated and disconnected from yourself, versus your partner is disconnected, shutting down. The more you try, the more you activate it, the more they're shutting it down. So this new theory saying that push and pull, this dynamic is the problem. So they're going, I think, a little bit deeper. And then the second last thing is the old theory says child focused, because, everything started in childhood. Let's look only at the kid, how they're behaving and how they're attaching to parents. It looks like, yeah, it makes sense, right? Because the kids, how they attach to their caregivers, like mom or dad. This is now how you then later attach to your partner. If your dad was emotionally unavailable, you're going to be attracted to someone similar with the same dynamic, someone who's emotionally unavailable. Sounds logic. So then they're doing then this focus on research on babies or on separating the mom and the kid. And that gave us, I think, research. However, then the new theory is also adult focused on couples. It also looks at like studies on couples and like emotional safety and conflict. And I think that's also extremely powerful because actually when I 5 years ago was with, in London with my partner, we were in fight and flight and conflict and everything. Eventually I stumbled into attachment theory. I studied everything, but I also went into the Gottman, the couple. Gottmans are this couple of researchers who are married and who are studying lots and lots and lots of married couples to see, hey, what makes a marriage successful and what makes a marriage fail. So that gave me so much more insight on communication, on more behind just the focus on kids and mom and separation, what's happening in our childhood. So that gave me a whole new picture. And that's kind of what the new attachment theory does anyway, without even me having to read more into this section. So, and then the last point is, what I want you to know is, that is really, really crucial. So the old theory is really awareness first. And that is where so many anxious attachers get stuck. And I would have probably in my old past life also gotten stuck there, only reading all of the self-help books, podcasts, binge watching, binge consuming, scrolling on social media, understanding everything there's to know about childhood traumas and how your parents showed up and who you are and everything. So often you're spending years and years in therapy. I had a client who had 2 therapists at the same time and me as a coach, and then we're looking for another coach. And at some point, talking about it, reading about it is just not enough. Like awareness will keep you in the overthinking loop, trying to understand and trying to make sense of it. So I was trying to get the client to take action on it, even just sitting 2 minutes with their feelings instead of just, can we talk about what my partner did yesterday and why she might have done this? Because this is not helpful. Like understanding it first, connecting all the pieces and dots is key. But then you have to take action. You have to take accountability for, hey, I need to process my emotions. I need to self-soothe because this is the method to become securely attached. But if you are never taking any actions and only staying in your head, only in the awareness part, you will always feel anxious. And that is, I think, the most powerful shift you can do and why the new attachment theory is so important, because they know that you can create and earn secure attachment style. They know it's not just awareness. It's not just something you can figure out where are you and that is it. If you're secure or if you're anxious or if you're avoidant or if you're disorganized, it's not something where it's fixed. You can become securely attached. You can even, once you're securely attached, you can even shift back into anxious. Or I have people messaging me or emailing me saying, oh my God, I used to be anxious. Now I'm so avoidant because of all the trauma. Like, don't disempower yourself because of relationship breakups, because of what your partner did or said or your ex did. Everything is valid. But now the question is, what do you want to do? Do you want to empower yourself, regulate yourself, and try to shift into a secure attachment style again? Or do you want to tell yourself, that's who I am, I can't change, that is just my life? That is a victim mentality and it's very disempowering. And maybe you're so dysregulated that right now, this is what you're telling yourself. But I want to tell you, you can become more secure. You don't have to do it overnight. In fact, it's not possible, but I did it within 6 months and I've got so many clients who did it within 4 months. It always depends on your starting point, on the amount of emotional trauma you had when you were little. It's not about, who is faster, but just becoming tiny bit more secure every day, because neuroplasticity proves it that our brain can change and will change even when you're older. So if you take nothing away from this video, just know secure attachment is no diagnosis, is no label. It's just a lens you can see yourself through to know, hey, you know what? Right now, a part of me feels more anxious. This is where I would put myself in. And there are quizzes I have, as well, where you can figure out more if you're anxious, if you're here more right now, or if you're here, to then see what can I do to shift into this pattern. And I have many more videos or podcast links explaining how to can shift more into a secure attachment style. Otherwise, yeah, I'm going to have some lunch now. Thank you so much for listening. Actually, we're going to have a walk first because she didn't had a long walk yet. So thank you so much for being here. Change in your relationship starts with you, thought by thought, action by action, and now episode by episode. Lots of love. Maya, ini, passaggio? Passaggio. Andiamo.